So it's the next day, and we're going to continue with the charcoal brazier. And before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about trimming tools. And the reason for that is, hang on, just a minute. Of course, the one I want isn't here. Okay. Sorry about that. Thought I had grabbed the ones I wanted, and turns out I didn't. All right, so the reason I want to talk about trimming tools real quick is, one, because there are about 1 billion different kinds, and everybody has their favorites. And some are really useful, and I do use these all on occasion. Some are really expensive. There are some like this that have a hardwood handle that tend to be a little bit more expensive. And these are nice because these handles will last forever. Even if you let them sit in your water, which I'm not actually sure why you would do, but you can. They have some that are different shapes, and you can get them in all kinds of shapes. I've seen some that are some off-the-wall L shapes, and yeah, you can get them in all different kinds of shapes. Most common ones you'll see are these two. Every beginning pottery kit that you see has these two trimming tools in it, and these are fairly useful. They're just loops of metal with a little bit of an edge on them, and you have this one which has a squarish end, and then you have a roundish edge end, and this is really useful for doing things like feet and defining feet. This one, called a pear tool because it's shaped like a pear, is useful for taking clay off of large spaces or large areas. This is kind of just a different variety of it. It's got a bit of a bigger loop right there, and then a bigger squarish loop. Again, this one's really useful. And so these are all really useful. The downside to ones like these are, one, you have to keep the metal clean, otherwise you'll get gouges. And two, you have to keep this metal sharp. Not shave the hair off your arm sharp, but sharp. Otherwise they don't do a really good job. So that's those. We're not going to use these today. Another one that's kind of the same style is called a loop tool because it's loops of metal wire. Now, for some reason, these used to be really popular and have gotten out of favor. But I have found that when you're trimming clay, we might actually have to use this today. When you're trimming clay that's a little on the wet side, this is a really good tool to have because this will trim clay that's a little bit too wet to trim without gouging or grabbing or anything like that. So this is really useful. We might actually have to use this one today. All right, and then I have a couple of other tools, and these are homemade. I made these. These three are made out of packing strap, like the kind that you'll see at construction sites wrapped around pallets of brick. This is really nice. It's thin enough that you get a good trim with it. You don't have to worry about putting an edge on it. It's cheap, it will last forever, and to be honest, if you're not careful, you can cut yourself really bad with this stuff. So, especially ends, we're going to use these for trimming, but like down here, I have it wrapped with tape. Make sure you have yourself protected from where the ends are cut, because that is really sharp. Okay? Nice thing about these is they're solid, and you can trim them and form whatever shapes you want. This one's really good for taking large amounts of clay off of big things. Just hold it like that, and I'll show you how this works in a little bit. So these two are smaller versions of the same thing that were made from hacksaw blades. These work really well. You do have to put an edge on these. For some reason, that I'm not sure what, you have to put an edge on these where you don't have to put an edge on these. But these are really nice, and these are really handy if you're doing chattering. You can do chattering with these, but I found that I get a little bit more control over what I'm trying to do with these smaller ones. To do this, you just take a hacksaw blade and you heat the middle of it up in a torch till it's bright red, and then you take 2 pairs of pliers and you snap it, and then you do the same thing again. You heat up an end and you bend it over to a 90-degree angle, and then from that point you put an edge on it. I use a bench grinder. You can use a file, you can use a hand grinder, you can use one of those Dremel tools, whatever. The other thing you can do is, especially right up here by where you're cutting with, is you take the saw teeth off. I've left them on down here because occasionally I'll use them for doing things like a texture. But I mean, you could very well take the teeth off all the way down. You could wrap these in tape, whatever. So, all right. We may or may not be using these here in a minute. So, put this up to the side. So, we're going to start assembling the charcoal brazier. And so, this piece is still fairly wet. I mean, it'll support its weight, and it doesn't squish without some effort, but it will. And as you can see, I mean, I can make marks on it just fairly easy. Under normal circumstances, I would say that this piece is too wet to trim. However, the reason I'm trimming it in this state is because I also want to assemble it. And for that, to get a really good bond, okay, move head from rear. All right, to get a really good bond between these two pieces, this will work better with it slightly wet, and we'll let it cure at a much nicer speed. Okay, so wet our piece, wet our rim, wet our wheel head, put our piece on there, get it on there, get it nice and centered. Getting it centered is pretty important at this point. Otherwise, it's gonna be off balance when you try to put this piece on, and then there's a danger, especially with the fact that it's gonna have burning charcoal and hot water and stuff like that. So get it centered. If you've noticed, wheel heads have these little concentric circles on them, or concentric lines on them. Really handy. Use them to help you get started centering if you're not good at tap centering. For some reason, I cannot figure it out. I have tried. People have showed me. I don't get it. It's okay. All right, so got our piece on there. And we're just going to clean up this outer edge, this outer surface really quick. We're not really worried about it being perfect. All right. This is really wet. All right, so this is where we come back to this loop tool. See how nicely that works? So, what we want to do really quick is figure out where this base is going to sit. And wouldn't you know it, I got it right the first time. All right. So, from there, we're going to take, you could use any number of different things. I know people that use a fork, a spork, their fingernail. I don't have fingernails. I keep them trimmed fairly short because if I don't, then I end up gouging pieces when I throw. I use a tool that's actually called a scoring tool, and it's used for scoring clay. You can buy it, you can make it. This one somebody else gave me to try out, and I've actually found I rather enjoy it. Yeah, so we're going to score this outer edge. All right, so, yep. Now, first time I did it with the tool dry. Now I'm going to go back with the tool wet. Just dip that in your water. this is making a little bit of a slurry for you to save you the trouble of having to keep slurry handy. And we're going to do the same thing with the base. Make sure we score it all the way around. Now you don't have to gouge into this piece when you're scoring it. I'm just lightly scoring it. All right. Take a little bit of extra slurry that I have sitting here. Then place the base on there. And you want to make sure that you're pretty close to being where you want it. It will slide around a little bit, but once we start marrying the two pieces together, you're pretty much stuck with it in the place that it is. Slide it back that way a little bit. All right, that's pretty good right there. All right, so we're going to press down, firm pressure. All right, and then I'm just going to take our thumb, start blending the two pieces together. Don't worry about getting it looking absolutely perfect right away. What's more important is to make sure that the pieces are well blended. So what I did is the first time I was going down and I was pulling clay from the base and joining it with the clay from the bowl. Now I'm going up, taking clay from the bowl and joining it to the base. All right. That's pretty good. When you're done, you shouldn't be able to see the transition line between the two pieces. All right. Then I'm just going to take the same rubber rib that I had yesterday. You really want to make sure you're using a flexible rib for this part of it, because that will help you. The flexible rib will get in there with all the contour. And just help make sure that there's no odd spots in there. All right. That's pretty good. All right, so now we're going to trim up the base. And again, we're not looking for it to be perfect, we're just kind of cleaning it up. Bit that was left over from pulling it off the wheel head off. All right, so this part is really important. We want to make sure that it's absolutely flat. this up.